And guests, it is my pleasure this afternoon to introduce to you Brenton Cox, who's the manager for the Adelaide Airport. There are two things which are unique, as I see it, with Brenton. One is that he was a law graduate, and he's presently still entitled to speak, to act in the Supreme Court of South Australia and also the High Court of Australia. But also, being the chairman, being the manager for the Adelaide Airport, everybody here is a customer of his, and so it just shows you how busy he must be. So I now ask Brenton to address you.
Yep. Thanks very much, Ivan. Now, I am at risk of rambling, so Ivan's going to stand up to tell me when to be quiet. And feel free to ask questions as we go along, but I think we will have some time at the end there. So, yes, you're all my customers as well. Also feel free to give me constructive feedback at any time. So what I thought I'd talk about is just taking a step back out of Adelaide and Australia, just really what are the key themes driving aviation as an industry. What does that mean then for our development pipeline, and I guess why are we confident in our development pipeline? What's the growth that's driving us? So that's generally what I'll cover today. There's a bit of propaganda up there, but what I really will say, because it sets a bit of the scene around the development pipeline, is that just before we built the terminal, which was 10 years ago now, our traffic numbers, our passenger numbers, the customers, you and I really, that travel through the airport, that numbers has doubled since that time. But probably importantly, the international passenger numbers have quadrupled. And that's a good thing, but also creates some infrastructure challenges as well. And I think we'll talk about some of those as we come through. But really probably just to kick off on what are the key drivers of aviation, are the key things going on. There's nothing surprising in all of this because these are impacting every single business. Changes in technology, global competition, it's a global marketplace, and Asian growth. So on technology, just as it applies to an airport setting, there's just a few examples up on the slide there, and I thought I'd just raise them to scare you a little bit to some extent. But I think one that's topical actually in the top right, last week we had Qatar start with its daily service to Doha. While that was fantastic for us, what was really great, it's one of the newest aircraft in the world, an A350, the first to fly to Australia. So I often get criticised in community meetings that Adelaide gets all the clapped out old aircraft, but here we're getting, which is not true by the way, and here is an example where we're getting the newest aircraft. The good thing as well for us is that it means they're quiet, which is good for the community. They low fuel burn, again, which is good for the environment. And because of that low fuel burn, they're very efficient aircraft, so they can fly long distances for a relatively low cost. So for a port like Adelaide, where we're described as being a long, skinny route, it actually means aircraft like this can make us economic. And Qatar have told us that they could not make us stack up as a destination on any other aircraft. So the good thing is, A350s, 787s, they're rolling off the production line. They're the aircraft of choice now. That's a really good thing for Adelaide. And actually there aren't too many challenges from that because there's no additional infrastructure we need to accommodate them. Look, this sort of is a little bit, I remember that movie Total Recall with Arnold Schwarzenegger and the trip to Mars. It's kind of a little bit like that at the moment where a lot of the trials for security, I mean, I don't know about you, but I don't like waiting, and when you're waiting and queuing up for security, that can get sort of annoying. And the idea is that you don't need to do that anymore. And so over the next 10 years, hopefully we'll see some developments where a lot of the screening can take place as you go. And this is, screening for, metal objects and explosives. And this right now, this is a trial at Incheon Airport in Korea. So these, you're sort of risk assessed, and then you put down a channel, and all of the sort of X-raying, everything happens as you go along. Whether it's that or something else, the good thing is that there is going to be improved security screening technology coming in. But the first thing you've got to do is get to the airport, and if you're in Adelaide, I guess most people tend to take a taxi or drive actually. And at the moment in Germany, there's these little doozies, which are robotic valet drivers. So at the moment, unless you go to the Qantas valet, say in Adelaide, it is sort of a rich person's thing to use valet. But these try to bring valet to the people. And the idea is that you can pull up into this little device, you leave your car there, it goes and stack park it. It could be quite a way away. It's not a really close sort of high value location. And then it has your flight details, and when you land, you can either pre-program your flight details, or you come off the plane and the GPS recognises your phone, and it goes and gets your car and brings it to the doorstep. This is happening now in Germany. It's probably a while off in Australia, but it's an exciting development. These things are coming. The other thing, bottom right there, that's here now, it's a little bit scary. I mean, most people now have smartphones. No matter what your demographic, people are just plugged in. And what that means is that you're capable of being tracked. You've got Wi-Fi on, you've got Bluetooth going. And if you're at Sydney Airport today, for example, they will track you from curbside to when you take off. And that sounds a little bit scary, and it could be if misused. But there's a couple of really positive uses. One is that if you're able to track surges of people, for example, we're able to track that people are being dropped off at the airport and there's quite a few people coming along. You'd expect there to be potentially queues. And so before the queues form, you can bring staff in to man up the security area. And without this tracking, you rely on sort of historical data, but this can give you live passenger information that can actually improve everyone's journey. So there can be some very good things. There can be some Machiavellian purposes as well. Airports, someone described to me earlier, are often like a big Westfield, which can be the case sometimes, not so much Adelaide, but what it can mean is by using this tracking technology, you can become profiled. So, for example, for a Chinese tourist, they spend a lot of money on cognac. They know that if you've checked in at a certain area, you've walked a certain way, you're profiled as, say, a Chinese tourist. The retail can structure themselves so that the cognac is easy to access, and you might even get a little push message to say 20% off cognac today. And that's happening now in airports around the world and shopping centres actually around the world. We actually don't do this yet, and we will eventually. It's inevitable, but we're very conscious that we don't want to bombard people and make people's lives easier. These are just a couple of touch points. There's a lot going on clearly in this wide world. I mean, Uber is another, and ride sharing, where our whole infrastructure is built around traditional ground transport, and we have to start rethinking things. And when you're investing money over an 80 sort of year period, digital disruption, which is a buzzword, I guess, can really change what you do. So flexibility is key. The other big one, and I don't have much time, so I'll just probably focus on the key point, is really that when part of my job is to go out and attract airlines to Adelaide, and people call it chasing tails. In the process of doing that, we're competing against the world. So we were just talking to an airline recently. We lost out. That airline put its flight onto Paris instead. Again, talking to one who decided that they weren't going to increase some capacity, and because they were putting it on to Gatwick in London. And everything's not about trying to get an airline to make money in Adelaide, because often it can be done. It's about leveraging their scarce resource, their metal, their aircraft, and making sure it can make more money in Adelaide than it can make anywhere else in the world at a given point in time. So that's our marketing challenge. The good thing with this is it also is an opportunity, because we're not just talking to Qantas and Virgin. There's a whole new world of airlines out there. The low-cost carriers, there's a couple of examples, some of them Australian in there today. It is a completely different beast. When I talk about global competition, part of that has been enabled by liberalisation. In the past, bilaterals would restrict airlines flying. But it was kind of to protect the legacy carriers. Now, there are very few restrictions into Adelaide in particular. We fall outside of almost every bilateral restriction, so there is nothing stopping any airline, bar a few exceptions, to fly to Adelaide. So it's pros and cons. The world's our oyster, but we're competing with the world at the same time. Asia is just an incredible opportunity. We're very lucky to be on the doorstep. I mean, that's just a chart of historic China growth inbound into Adelaide over the last 10 years. Where it's in its infancy, we're actually not very good when it comes to, so far, attracting the Asian market, but we're getting much better. And I think certainly South Australian tourism today has got more funding and is able to have more focus on this market and doing some great things in China. Funnily enough, my previous home in Sydney, now China is the biggest inbound market, so bigger than New Zealanders, bigger than British. We're a little bit odd. We've still got British as number one, and then we have New Zealand as number two and China inbound number three. In 10 years' time in Adelaide, that China should be number one, and probably before then, because that trajectory is going to continue. It's only in its infancy. We don't even have direct Chinese flights right now, so it's pretty hard to get to Adelaide from mainland China right now, and so you can imagine the opportunity when that does kick off. So, which leads me to sort of our development pipeline, and part of this pipeline is, look, we've got $500 million we're due to spend in the next 5 years, and our partners will spend another $500 million, so it's $1 billion over the next 5 years. It's quite a lot of money, and people go, are you really going to spend that money? You know, there's often I guess until maybe the subs announcement recently, there's been a lot of negativity about the economy in Adelaide, yet we were still committing this fund. So we'll talk a bit about our growth, why we're confident in this. The other thing is our track record. It wasn't that long ago when people remember flying into that little baby. I actually used to like it. Someone mentioned before, I used to love coming home, and when you live in Adelaide, you forget that Adelaide has a smell, and that sounds a bit weird. There's a dry air and eucalyptus, and you used to just get off the aircraft and you'd smell it along with the avgas, which I was a bit addicted to as well. But so it wasn't all bad, but I think it wasn't that long ago, just over 10 years ago, where that's what we're going through. So this is 30 years' time, so that's not what's there today. So we do have a vision for continual expansion, and our terminal was built 10 years ago with a view to being able to continually expand. And right now today, just got my little clicker here, most of this isn't there. A third of that car park, that plaza's there. The main terminal, although it's not as high and it's not out the back. So I'll talk to you in a second about some of this stuff that's going to come online. None of this is here. My asbestos little written offices is just there. So there's going to be a lot of change. But we've got a vision and we've got a clear plan to deliver it, and we actually have the growth coming down to warrant it. I won't bore you with some of these projects, so we don't have much time, but what's amazing is a lot of this tarmac costs heaps of money. We've got to go down 8 metres deep, where we have to enable 400 tonnes of aircraft going over the top. So what looks like road, basically aircraft parking bays, if I look at that one there, which is 4 bays, that's $20 million. So it just looks like your local neighbourhood road, but there's a lot more to it. There's fuel underneath, there's lighting and everything else. So this is going on at the moment. We're about to finish it. It's resheeting everything out the front. If you look out, there's this beautiful new tarmac out the front for those that like tarmac. For A380s, we don't have regular A380s at the moment. They can land whenever they want. There was one that landed last month. But if we were to have regular operations, we need to strengthen some of the edges of our runways to do that and put on an extra boarding bridge. There's some of that work's taking place over the next year. This is sort of interesting, I think, because it's a new medical services precinct down on Tapley's Hill Road, near Hobart Town down there. So RFDS, they're just an incredible charity, and they've got a new headquarters that's nearly built. It'll be operational towards September, October this year. It's an incredible facility, and it's just a step change for them. Nearby at the moment, we've got MedStar, where there'll be permanent facilities at the moment. They're a little bit rustic. It'll enable sort of the search and rescue helicopters to have medical surgeon staff on call. It just makes that retrieval much more efficient. The other thing doesn't quite fit in with emergency services is a pet hotel, and guide dogs are in the process now of building a pet hotel, and they're building it before we're building a human hotel, unfortunately, but it should be quite good. This will service not just people looking to fly away and drop Fido off and have a bit of a 5-star experience. the pet hotel. There's also the caravan park on the coast there, and you're not allowed to bring pets. So at the moment, people are travelling Australia in their caravans. It enables them to drop off their pets. Fast travel, and there's a lot to talk about this. Adelaide was the first airport in Australia to have, fast travel in a common user environment. We're going to be the first to have an entire terminal check-in area with fast travel. And fast travel is just a fancy way of saying remote kiosks and automated bag drop. And if you go to T3 in Sydney for Qantas, you'll see how that works. You've seen what was a Coliseum, and now which was full, to now a Coliseum where you can play a cricket game. There's a lot of space there. And the benefit for this for us is that now, to be honest, I never check in. I do everything on my phone. I never even bring luggage. I just carry on. So this area is redundant for me, and this area is increasingly redundant for people. But we would need to sink a lot of capital to expand traditional check-in if we weren't going to do this. I'm getting a wind up, so I'll quickly move through. We're spending $10 million on bathrooms. We're building a new GA terminal for the rich and famous with their private jets, but also just your enthusiasts with their general aviation. I will dwell a little bit on this because we made this hard for ourselves. We plan to build the most incredible hotel, seamlessly integrated into the terminal and down into what we call the plaza area, which is unusual for an airport hotel. It's normally just sort of a bolt-on that's lost in the terminal, or it's unconnected, disconnected. So this has taken us quite a while to get going, but we're in the dying throes of what will either enable this to start building this year or not happen for some time. So watch this space. Hopefully we've got a positive announcement later this year. The business park is really just providing space, office space for people who need to operate in the terminal. The terminal expansion, someone asked me earlier on what's the biggest challenge at the moment, and it is really going back to that international growth we've experienced. It is accommodating that international growth. We need to spend as much money now to expand our terminal as it cost to build it in the first place. And there's 10 years of inflation there, but it's still the same nominal figure. And what we need to do is the people's beloved elevated road is going to go. We've got to build a bunch of tarmac around the back. You can double stack pier at the moment. You can only come in the front. You'll be able to come in around the back. It will go up a level, and we're going to move international towards the Virgin end at the moment. And otherwise, international will keep expanding down the middle and start to cramp the domestic operations. And the challenge we have is that we need to get all of our airline partners to agree. We'd actually like to start this now. In our view, some of the international experience, outbound and inbound, is not what we pride ourselves in delivering. And so we would like to get started on this soon, but we've got to convince our airline partners. And actually, it was fairly topical last week. Minister Bignell made a reference, started a war with Qantas publicly, and Qantas are our biggest customer, really important for us. But Qantas will be difficult because they don't have a direct international operation out of Adelaide. They do it synthetically through Emirates. They have Jetstar. They've got 3 of their One World carriers, but a Qantas Red Tail doesn't fly. So we need to get them to agree to some infrastructure that won't directly benefit their operation because they don't have an international operation. It's only a domestic operation. So that's the biggest challenge we have today. It'll be beautiful. It'll be better than it is today in terms of its look and feel. I'll quickly skip through because we've got no time. What I will say here is that we raise money in US debt markets, and they love us. I was in the market at the same time as Sydney and Perth, and we got a better deal than Sydney and Perth. And what they say is Adelaide has had 2 decades of uninterrupted growth, and there's no booms and busts in there. Your economy is highly diversified. You don't have a massive mining sector. You don't have a big property sector that dwarfs everything else. So they look at Perth and they freak out with the mining. They look at Sydney and they get scared about the property. They look at Adelaide and they go, you guys are lovely, diverse and stable. So our economy is better than everyone talks about. We've had some positive news recently, and so we're committed to what we see as the facts rather than the front page in terms of our growth. We also have the ability to win back some market share. You probably realise you're all customers. If you want to fly internationally, a lot of you have to fly out via Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane. We need to win that market share back so you can fly out to your destination direct, and that's about getting international capacity. Freight is the same story. We leak 41% of South Australia's produce out of other ports. So you're getting crayfish from Port Lincoln getting on a truck flying out of Melbourne, and it's just crazy. It adds a day to our fresh produce, so it hamps our competitiveness as an export destination. So this is a big opportunity, and it's all about direct flights. So that's the wind-up. I don't know if we've got time for questions.
Yeah, that's what we're looking for, a couple of questions. Yeah.